Podcast, a conversation between friends over a passage of Scripture. I'm Carolyn Kirsten.
And I'm Marvin Williams.
And today's episode is 104.
Wow.
Continuing our chronological look through the Gospels. And today we're focusing on Jesus' early ministry and his first miracle.
Very good, very good. So let me start with a question.
Okay.
How do you feel when you receive an invitation to an important event? You receive an invitation.
Honored. I feel
Okay.
honored.
Absolutely.
I take and immediately think of like weddings because ever since planning our own wedding, now even planning our son's wedding this summer, knowing that invitation list is a select list, it is an honor to be included. Like, for sure, there were other people that we wanted to invite, but you're just not able to. So to make the list.
Yeah, I love it.
I think that is a great, I feel very honored and I know that's a big deal.
I feel the same way. Feel like I'm a part of an exclusive club.
Yeah.
And I was invited to an event with the Spartans, and it was an exclusive event, and I was selected among 10 individuals, social media individuals, and I was one of those individuals to come, and I just felt honored, like you said, but I felt like also I was a part of an exclusive club, a group of people to come to an event like that. And so the reason we're talking about the whole invitation thing is because these chapters that we're covering today, there are a number of different invitations given, and we even see that Jesus himself receives an invitation, which is kind of a different way of thinking. But we'll jump into that. But we're looking at these invitations that were given. But right away, we are introduced with a familiar character. So we're looking at John chapter 1, verses 35 through 51, and John chapter 2. And we're introduced right away to a very familiar character, John the Baptist.
Yes.
John the Baptist had, just like many others, had a group of disciples or individuals who followed him. And we know John the Baptist to be Jesus' cousin. We know him to be a forerunner, inviting people to not follow him, but to follow Jesus. And so immediately we are faced with him. We see him again, and Jesus walks past. And what does John say?
Yes. So I do think it, because I would picture this in your mind. So John is with his disciples. Jesus is walking past, and John calls him a name, which I guess that sounds negative.
What is?
He says, "Behold, the Lamb of God." He calls him the Lamb of God, which does sound like a strange thing to call someone, but was very significant. Yeah. And why is that?
Well, this is a reference to the Old Testament sacrificial system. Where lambs were slain or slaughtered to forgive, as a sign of forgiveness of people's sins. The blood was sprinkled, and yet they had to do that year after year. And so they had to find the perfect lamb. They had to find one that was basically spotless, if you will, to take away the sins of the people. And so again, it was a system that they used, and they would have to do this all the time, and it was a messy kind of thing. And so John recognizes Jesus being the ultimate lamb that would be the one perfect lamb to die for the sins of all of humanity, and they wouldn't have to do it again. Wouldn't have to do it over and over again. And so this is a very, very significant name that John calls Jesus, because it is a forecast of what Jesus will do on the cross, where he will be the sacrifice for our sins. And so we see John saying that, and then all of a sudden he grows, or actually he doesn't grow. He loses people. He loses his followers who are following after him. He says, "Behold the Lamb of God." And right away he loses his entire church, and so he's by himself. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, it is fulfilling the role that John came for.
Absolutely,
though. He was the precursor to Jesus.
Yep.
So while it does seem like, oh man, he was building all this influence. I mean, using, modern day, he's got all these followers.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, whoosh, they're just following somebody else. But that actually was John's role, which he did know. He was not trying to continue to build his own following, keep people to himself. He was leading the way for Jesus. So when then Jesus says, hey, what are you seeking to them? And they say to him, Rabbi, which means teacher, where are you staying? So then it does immediately shift to these disciples of John now are seeking to understand more about who Jesus is.
Yeah, and so they ask that this weird question, where are you staying, which is a kind of a symbol and sign of, no, you are now our you're now our rabbi, you're now our master, which I love your point. Just put a pin there. I love the point that John wasn't trying to build his own kingdom. He was pointing people to Jesus, which is true of us as well. We point people to Jesus, whether they attend Trinity or whether they attend our group or not, as long as they connect with Jesus.
Yeah.
And this is what these individuals are doing. And then Jesus says something which I think is kind of cool. He says, come and see and you'll find out. It's almost kind of Jesus is the middle school games, where are you staying? Well, come and see, you'll find out. And it's kind of almost with an attitude. And really he was inviting them to get close. There's
our first invitation.
Absolutely. He was inviting them to get to know him and know what he's about, and where they are learning from him. They're learning that he is in fact the Messiah, the one sent by God. And so, which again I love. He the other thing that they end up staying with him, and the word staying is one of John's, I believe, one of his favorite words. He uses it in John 15. We know that word to be abide. So abide in me and I'll abide in you. Same word. And so these John's disciples, who are now Jesus's disciples, they come and they abide with him. They stay with him. And in so doing, they find out a little bit more about him, and they get close to him, which is the desire, should be the desire for every follower of Jesus, is to get close to him, abide in him, and so that we might know him better.
Yeah, I do think it's powerful that Jesus invites them into a relationship.
Yeah.
He doesn't directly answer, where are you staying? I'm staying at the Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
He doesn't answer with information. He answers with that invitation to relationship, which in the context of that culture, the where are you, that would be even their question is not really asking for information. Yeah. It's I'm going to align myself with you.
Absolutely.
And that's powerful. And then we see another invitation. Philip is then encounters Jesus and says, oh my goodness, this is the Messiah. This is who we've been waiting for.
Right.
He goes to Nathanael and says, you've got to come and see. He gives an invitation as well. Also, on that same line, he invites Nathanael to experience Jesus himself, not just, let me tell you about this guy, come and actually see him.
Yeah. And then Jesus begins talking to Nathanael, and just like, and Jesus says, oh, I saw you under the tree. And that kind of wows Nathanael in a sense. And then Jesus says, oh, you thought that was something? If you hang with me, you're going to see something way cooler than what that was. Mm-hmm. You're going to see, the Son of Man. You're going to see angels descending up and down. You're going to see this whole idea of me being the stairway from earth to heaven. And so I love the fact that again, another invitation.
Yeah.
And there's if we go back just a bit, we see Andrew following Jesus and then going to get his brother, inviting his brother Peter, we know him as Simon Peter, to come. Listen, we have found the Messiah, and come and see for yourself that in fact he is who he says he is. And so we see all of these invitations in this first chapter, and it's an invitation not to church per se. It's not to some cool concert. It really is to get to know Jesus and to experience him personally.
And I think can be an encouragement for those of us that feel like, okay, I want to tell others about Jesus, but I don't know, I don't have the right words, or I don't know the right things to say. That the invitation, hey, come and see. Let's experience Jesus together. Whether that's, hey, let's read through the Gospels together. You could even use this podcast as a tool. Read those passages and then listen and then have your own spiritual conversation. It's the come and see and experience.
Absolutely.
It's not convince somebody through a compelling argument.
Yep.
It's not, I need to have all the right answers, but come and see and experience for yourself. And that's how God works.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that gave them confidence to say, come and see, is because they had encountered Jesus for themselves.
Yes.
And so they were convinced with the compelling evidence that Jesus gave that he was in fact Messiah. And so really it comes down to it's kind of difficult to invite somebody to experience something that you've never experienced yourself. Mm-hmm. And so the first step is for us to experience Jesus, and it gives us confidence to say, hey, listen, have you seen the changes in my life? And I'm not putting myself up on a pedestal or anything like that, but Jesus has really changed my life. And if that's really real, then other people will notice it and say, I have noticed. And then they'll begin asking questions. And then that's our opportunity to say, hey, listen, come and see Jesus for yourself. And what he's done for me, we believe that he can do it for you as well.
Yeah.
So
another detail I think we can learn from this interaction, particularly with Philip and Nathanael, is Nathanael is quite critical of Jesus and says, well, can anything good come out of Nazareth?
Right.
Like, really questions. You're saying this guy is somebody special, but he's from Nazareth, which had a poor reputation.
Right.
That can't be the case. That invitation to come and see, I think, is also a lesson for us in confronting stereotypes, confronting prejudice.
No, that's really good.
So, actually, instead of just saying, oh, he's from Nazareth, well, actually come get to know the guy.
Exactly.
And you may find out that the stereotype, whatever preconceived ideas you had about a person based on their race, their ethnicity, their socioeconomic status, when you actually get to know someone and be in relationship with them, those stereotypes quickly fall away. And that Philip is inviting Nathanael into that right here. Yeah, come and see. Actually get to know this guy. Don't just blow him off because he's from Nazareth.
Absolutely love it. Now, we have another invitation. Now, this is kind of a invitation to fun. Not that following Jesus in the first chapter is not fun, but this is another invitation, and that comes in chapter 2. And so right away we see what?
There's a wedding.
And we love weddings.
We love weddings. And I do love that John takes the time to tell us in chapter 2, verse 2, that Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. Jesus belonged there. That means he was in relationship with these people. It also reminds us that celebration is a good use of our time.
Absolutely.
I mean, Jesus took time to do this. He was here to save the world, but he took time to go to this wedding to celebrate with this family. And I think that's a lesson for us too.
And he normalizes fun. He normalizes this invitation to a wedding. And I think sometimes people have preconceived notions about Jesus. He's kind of a stick in the mud and he didn't have fun and he just
always have to be spiritual, means serious.
Exactly. He was in the temple all the time. He was at church all the time. And we see here that he loved going to weddings. He loved going to dinners. He loved hanging out with people. And so we get an opportunity to see an invitation that Jesus received to come to this wedding. Now, again, a wedding was a big deal. It was really a village celebration. It wasn't just. It's way different than ours, where we send out invitations and we kind of cut the guest list down because
a select group of people
because of expenses and those kinds of things, but. First century weddings, the entire village was invited. Whether you received an invitation or not, you could show up at a wedding, and because it was, in fact, everyone knew one another, and it was a big celebration. So you have all of these people at this wedding, and everybody's having fun. The music is going, and everyone is having fun. But something scandalous happens. Something the unthinkable happens, and that is the wine runs out. Wine was a symbol of celebration and joy, and so the wine runs out at the wedding. And this was significant because you you just did not run out of food and you did not run out of wine. You could actually be litigated against if you ran out of wine, if you ran out of food. And so, so Mary, someone must have told Mary, hey, we have no more wine. And so she goes to Jesus and says what?
And she says to the servant, she says, you've got to do something about this.
That's right.
And initially he says, hey, Mom, it's not my time. Actually, he says, woman, which sounds like a derogatory way to address someone. We talked about that when we did the initial season of this, when we did the book of John. Calling her woman is not like how that would be very offensive now.
Exactly.
It is actually a term of endearment. So it would probably be more along the lines of, oh, Mom, my time has not yet come. But she tells the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. And you had a great insight into that response.
I just love that this is the heart of discipleship. Like, do whatever he tells you to do. Like he said, Mary just simply got out of the way, and he is the one who's in control now. And whatever he tells you to do, do it. And I love the fact that at the very base and at the very heart of discipleship is obedience. Yeah. Whatever Jesus tells us to do, we do it. And again, there's always resistance in us because we don't see the beginning from the end. We don't know how it's going to work out. And yet this is a very simple phrase, but it's a very powerful phrase. Do what he tells you to do. So the question for me is, like, what has Jesus told me to do that I'm not presently doing? Or what has he told me to do? And will I obey what he tells me to do? And so I just love the fact that Mary right away understands that Jesus is in control. And she, even in this moment, submits to her son. She's older than her son, but she submits to him as the one who knows what's going to happen and she doesn't really know what he's going to do, but she knows that he's going to do something. And she just says, hey, listen, it's not my deal now, it's his. Do what he tells you to do. And I love that. Yeah. And so so Jesus begins giving instructions and
says, fill these large jars. We're not talking like a gallon jug, with water. Yeah. And then they start serving it, and it's no longer water in it. It's become wine. Yeah. And I love this little detail in verse 9 where it says, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, nobody knew where this wine came from, only the servants. Yeah. And this is Jesus's first miracle. He is not following what good business practice would say, like, come in with a splash. Be sure everybody knows. You want to build your influence. You've got to, he should have had the cameras rolling and all the rest. But instead, nope. Yeah. Nobody even knows except the servants who were like, we know we filled this with water and now it's become wine. Yeah. I just love how that just shows us that God's power can be known by anyone and everyone. Yeah. The lowliest servant who nobody would give them any mind, but they were the ones that were let in on this miracle. They were the ones that got to witness it.
And he's working when we don't even think he's working and know he's working. Yes. And so nobody in the party knew other than these servants. And John says, again, he gives us a couple of details. This is his first miracle, and this is when he began to reveal his glory. And that's what I think that's verse 11. It says, this is the first of the signs. Sign is another word for miracles. And Jesus did at Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And so we see not only was there a manifestation of the glory of God, the shine of God, if you will, this attention because of the miracle. I mean, this is an amazing miracle where Jesus begins to institute something new, something different. Like, if you hang out with me, I'm going to give you a joy that religion and legalism cannot give you. Yeah. It truly is a deep, joyful relationship so that's one area where where people see his glory. But then I think also there's a practical side to the glory of God, which is, we see the spiritual side, but there's a very practical side. Jesus saved this couple from financial debt, from financial ruin, and he
terrible reputation.
Terrible reputation. So there's this sense where he does this miracle, and it is both this spiritual depth of I'm ushering in something new, but also he protects this couple, and Jesus does both. I love that. He cares about, not only does he care about weddings, he cares about young couples. and them getting started on the right foot. And so I love this. I love this first miracle and these invitations. And these invitations were not just for then; they are invitations even for today. Come and see that Jesus is in fact the Messiah. Come and see for yourself, to encounter him, get close to him, know who he is, hear his teaching, know that he is the stairway between earth and heaven. And then, man, if you hang out with Jesus, he will take your scandal. You can bring your scandal to him, and he'll turn it and flip it, and we'll get a chance to experience him in some new and fresh ways as we come and connect with him.
So this chapter closes with a scene that the other gospel writers cover later.
Yep.
And I think we talked about in an earlier episode that John's gospel was written later than the other three. And he's not as interested necessarily in filling in the chronological details.
Right.
He has a story to tell about who Jesus is, that he is God's son. And so he puts this event of Jesus clearing the temple right here. We go from the wedding to then Jesus clearing the temple. And I think it's and we'll talk more about it when we cover it with the other gospel writers too, but I think it's worth it. And John has a point here in bringing this about. But so Jesus goes to the temple for the Passover, and he is deeply disturbed how there are people changing money, selling animals for the sacrifices, and he's flipping over the tables and is just very upset by the fact of how they are abusing and changing the purpose of what this church building is supposed to be. I think for us, a way that we can apply that in our own modern day is remembering that the church building is where we gather for worship.
Yeah.
It's not for selfish gain.
Yep.
Or personal benefit.
Yep.
I think sometimes maybe we're not coming to church to make a buck, but maybe we do come in thinking, okay, I got to get something out of this for this week to help me feel better.
Yeah.
And so I just encourage each one of us to examine our hearts. Like, what is my heart motivation? What's my focus when I come? Is it to worship God and encourage others, or is it just to get something out of it for myself?
Yeah. And I think when Jesus, he says in this moment that he's consumed by the passion and of the house of God, or the temple. So there's this sense where Jesus is loving this. This is a place where the worship of God happens, where the reverence of God happens and takes place. And so Jesus is passionate about it. And hence he clears the temple of things that shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. He cleanses the temple. And so it started me thinking, what is my passion? Do I have a similar passion for the place of God, whether that's this church, whether it's a church building, or wherever we know God shows up? Do I have a passion for the presence of God? Do I have, what am I consumed by right now? Is it something that is not pointing people to God? And so Jesus has this unusual passion for the presence of God in this temple. And I think it's a question for all of us to ask, like, what are we passionate about as it relates to the things of God? And I pray that I would clean out anything that takes away my passion for God and his presence in my life, just similar to what Jesus did. And so I think even kind of in a kind of sideways, this is an invitation to cleanse our own temple. Mm-hmm. Again, the building is a place where we experience the presence of God, but right now our bodies are the new temple, if you will. The church people is the new temple where the Spirit of God dwells. And those things that shouldn't be, I think those things, if we're holding on to them, they can actually keep us from experiencing the presence of God. Yeah. And what do we need to clean so that we might do so?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then this chapter closes with some interesting verses 24 and 25. It says, "But Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them, because he knew all people, and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he himself knew what was in man. Now, a wrong way to understand this verse is if you read it and said Jesus on his part did not entrust himself to them. Like, wait, does that mean Jesus didn't care about people?
Right.
Or
That's
he wasn't?
not what he's saying.
No, it is not what he's saying. And as we read all of the Gospels, we see, no, he was definitely in relationship with people. He's not remaining distant or aloof. But he does, what that does mean is that he's not looking to people for his identity.
Yeah.
He's not depending on their reaction to decide if what he's doing is worthwhile. He's not focused on trying to please people. He understands who he is, and that what matters the most is his relationship with God. He's not falling into people pleasing or being influenced by humans because he knows that's a foolish direction to go. So I think those are interesting verses that John ends this chapter with.
Yeah, I mean, so much here, so much to encounter from Jesus in these opening chapters of John that we saw, or this whole idea of invitation. So, what can we believe about God? What can we believe about Jesus? What can we believe about ourselves? From this episode.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different things.
That's
so
right.
I think just to pick one, what stood out to me as we were just talking through was, maybe even tying in a couple. Mary's direction to do whatever Jesus tells you to do, along with looking at my own heart and what is consuming me. Like, am I actually stepping into obeying? Are there things that I know that God has directed me to do or not do that I need to step into? Is that what is consuming my heart, is following him? Or maybe am I what Jesus was not, in looking to other people for direction? So I think that was one thing that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's conglomeration of all that we've covered. Jesus says to these men in the beginning, follow me. And so I'm asking myself, where am I not following? Do I, when our kids were small, we say, okay, do this, and they take their time to do it. And so where am I taking my time, dragging my feet to do what Jesus has asked me to do? Coupled with what Mary says, whatever he tells you to do it. Am I, and again, I'm really double clicking on what you said. Am I following him? Am I doing what he tells me to do? Am I sharing with others? Am I inviting others to come and see, and that he is in fact the Messiah? So I think that those are some that have really impacted me. Am I following him in inviting others to experience Jesus for themselves, or do I get afraid, or am I, will people even believe what I say, or look at me strangely or funny? Or you're supposed to say things like that because you're a pastor, those kinds of things. So really asking, am I inviting others, and am I following him in a way that says I'm actually doing what he tells me to do? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, friends, for joining us. And we do encourage you to offer an invitation, even this very week. Invite someone to have a spiritual conversation with you.